Hello and welcome to another episode of the Smaulgld Speculation series. Today we're going to talk about the Tether controversy. First of all, we have to know what Tether is. There's a lot of controversy surrounding this cryptocurrency, and let's just first give a quick definition. Tether is a pretty interesting concept in that it purports to be a cryptocurrency that trades as a cryptocurrency that is backed by a fiat currency, the dollar. So the theory is, or the idea of the issuance of the currency Tether, is that when you buy a Tether, there's a dollar somewhere to match your Tether somewhere in a bank account held by the company. And they are supposed to maintain a one-to-one correspondence between your Tether and the money in the bank. So you can immediately see how there might be issues and people thinking, well, is the money really there? Is there an audit and so on? So there's that issue about Tether, whether it's being properly administered to, because you never know with these things. They could say you have $1 to your Tether, and then the legal language, according to some people who have researched this, says they don't have to redeem your Tethers for dollars. So who knows if this is just Ether one further step removed from fiat dollars, which are already not there because physical dollars do not equal to the amount of dollars that they can print digitally. So that's the concept of Tether, and the advantage of Tether is that you don't have to cash out your sales of cryptocurrencies into dollars and do the conversion. You just trade them for Tether on a one-to-one correspondence with the dollar. So if you sell a Bitcoin for $9,000, $10,000, you get 10,000 Tether. So first, the question is, are they actually backed by dollars? And people have done research into this. No one knows all the details around the company, where they do their banking. But this cryptocurrency has hundreds of millions of dollars in market cap. So that means that they must have a bank, or should have a bank, with hundreds of millions of dollars. Now we know that first of all is problematic because having a bank account with hundreds of millions of dollars in it is not FDIC protected. Where do they hold these dollars? How many accounts do they have? That people don't know. Now, how do Tethers come into existence? Well, you would think someone would say, I want to buy a Tether. So they tender their dollar, and then they get a dollar. They get a representation in the form of a Tether that supposedly is immediately backed by a dollar. Again, I don't know how the mechanics of that work. Now, the way this ties into a controversy, that sounds controversial enough if it's not being done exactly as I just described it. You can see how people could be concerned. There isn't a one-to-one correspondence. If they freeze the assets of the bank that the money's supposedly in or is only partially in, well, then you're out of luck because your Tether's not backed by anything. It just says it's a Tether, and it's tethered to a bank account which has been drained by the authorities. Now, there's a connection that makes it even more controversial between Tether and Bitfinex that some people, and I'll give you the names of the people that you could follow. They've done a good job of far more research on this than I have. I'm only presenting my initial reaction to what these researchers have found and have been researching quite diligently for a while. Silver Watchdog, there's a guy named Bitfinex, Boomerocracy. There's people that are working on this. There's a guy who's done a great YouTube on it, what's his name here? I just saw his very good video. That's Bitfinex. You just saw fly by there. His YouTube channel is Data Dash. So you want to check that out either before you finish watching this or after. His is about 30 minutes long. This shouldn't be that long. Now, what is the connection between Tether and this Bitfinex exchange? Well, some people have pointed out that whenever the price of Bitcoin drops, there's an immediate flood, or has been recently, of Tether, and that is corresponding with a reflation of the Bitcoin price after a dump. So some are speculating that the Tethers are being issued in order to pump up the price of Bitcoin, and that has an impact across all of the coins in the ecosystem. And Bitfinex is one of the largest trading exchanges. Sometimes it trades 10, 20, up to 30% of Bitcoin volume. There's other large exchanges. It's not like the days of Mt. Gox when 70% of trades went through that exchange, but it is a significant source of trading. Now, Coinbase or GDX is also in the top 3 or 4. They don't trade in tethers. So the question now is Tether actually a Bitcoin pump facilitator? Or, and this is where I add my 2 cents to the speculation, is it really just a liquidity lifeline for Bitfinex? And I'm going to explain what I mean. And then I want to get your thoughts on this one. So this guy on Twitter, a real good researcher, Bitfinex, you can follow him right there. And he's created this chart showing that correlation. He's done a lot more than just this correlation. But he's basically showing that whenever there's a drop in the price of Bitcoin, you get these big surges in the issuance of the Tether, and then the price, you can see, doesn't stay down very long. It shoots up. Now, I looked at that with fresh eyes because I have not been following Tether. I only known of its existence, but I haven't really followed its use or issuances other than what I explained above. That's all I know about it. But I question whether the connection between those Bitcoin market drops and new tethers is a result of people selling their Bitcoin and exchanging it for Tether. And therefore, that's why you see the big creation of tethers in the system. And then, of course, the price rises because people buy on the dips. That's my theory. Now, I asked Bitfinex this. I'll show you the questions I asked. I have not received a response yet. And as I mentioned here, this seems like fractional reserve crypto without the reserves. But so when you when you have these big drops in Bitcoin and the corresponding issuances of Tether, is that a result of people just switching into tethers and therefore more tethers get issued to match the conversions of the Bitcoin? Now you can see where I'm going with this, because if you were to go to sell your your Bitcoin on Coinbase, they have to come up with the cash to give you. Well, Bitfinex is no different. They have to come up with either the cash or the Tether. But if they don't have the cash, they can easily create the Tether, because you don't know whether those tethers are backed or not. And there's some speculation that Tether and Bitfinex are one and of the same entities. Now, I haven't been able to do the research into that, but then, of course, I think there's not enough information publicly to make a determination whether they're connected or not. I think Bitfinex is a Taiwanese exchange. So if they're exchanging Bitcoin for Tether, that would explain the big increase in the issuances of Tether around the drops, and then the subsequent increases could be explained not because they're using the Tether to buy back the Bitcoin, but because they're using the Tether to cash out the selling Bitcoin. That would be not a sin of Bitfinex trying to pump the price of Bitcoin, but rather highlight a flaw in Bitfinex's liquidity, in that in order to keep their volume trading going and getting whatever benefit they get out of volume trading, they have to be able to always cash out people. And if they had these big drops in Bitcoin, they couldn't cash them out maybe. But if you have if you have tethers, and you can always issue tethers, the theory is, and it doesn't cost you anything to issue them, and let's say you're not even backing them with the dollars, well, then you can always issue more Tether. Sounds like, I'm not saying they do this, but this is what some people suspect. Sounds like when you have an issue with liquidity in the banking system, fractional reserve banking system, you just issue more dollars. If they're not backed by gold, you don't have an issue. You could say they're backed by gold, it doesn't matter. If you can just issue them, you issue them. Same with Tether. You can say it's backed by dollars, but let's say it isn't. Well, they just issue them, and that solves their liquidity issue. Now, if you look at Coinbase, from what I understand, you have limits on how much you can withdraw, and that makes sense because they don't have all that cash lying around, and if they do, they have to have it in secure places. They have to have an FDIC account. So if you make a big sale in Coinbase, you have to make special arrangements to get certain amount of cash out at a time, and then they limit your cash withdrawals. Well, obviously, when you limit cash withdrawals, you limit the ability of trading, and I think Bitfinex is possibly saying, well, we don't need that issue. We want purely liquid, highly tradable, 24/7 markets. We want to do as much trading as we can. And this Tether helps us do that. That's the theory. Now, if that is what they're doing, that highlights not just an issue at Bitfinex, that highlights an issue just in all exchanges. Because if the way that they solve their liquidity issue is just by printing Tether, that's like printing Ether, perhaps. Now, if indeed there is a one-to-one correspondence between the Tether and the dollar backing it, then it's genius, and they've created a system where you have this 24/7 trading system. You want to cash out, you can cash out, you get your Tether. I just don't know how that all works. And it seems like quite a feat in order to make that work. So it sounds like they don't have enough fiat capital, so they just print Tether. And maybe they try to get around to backing it. It just seems to me it's almost an impossible task to pull off this scheme of constantly trading and refilling the tethers and backing them with dollars and having a bank or series of banks that are willing to do this on a daily or whatever basis they do it, hourly, I don't know. But it would just seem the bank would, and you run the risk, even if a bank can do it, all of a sudden they can't do it, or the regulators say you shouldn't do it. So this does lead to a lot of questions as to whether Tether actually is performing the function that it's performing. It also raises the question, and people have asked me this, is how do you cash out a Bitcoin? Well, you go to the bank, you cash out, and then you go to the bank, and the bank wants to know where you got $10,000. That's not so much of an issue because while they'll report it, if you can show the source of funds, you don't really have an issue. The real issue, I think, is not being able to get the $10,000 from the exchange when you sell because they may not have it or they may limit your getting it. So it seems like by promoting the use of this Tether, they've avoided the liquidity issue by having a source of liquidity in Tethers. But that does highlight that these other high volume exchanges may have the same issue in issuing enough cash to cover their sales. Now, people could do, but they really can't do now is, if you wanted to get out, is you could use your Bitcoin and buy something at a place that actually takes your Bitcoin. But those places currently are few and far between. So you may be able to buy real estate, but probably not. You could buy a car, but probably not. And there's not many places that are dealing in Bitcoin. So I think that the Tether situation has created an illusion of liquidity, especially in the altcoins. You sell your altcoin and they're able to execute the sale and issue you Tether at the same time. And you think that you now have sold a illiquid coin, but because you've got Tether. But the question is, can you exchange your Tether for dollars? Now, maybe not. Now, probably in that case, the best thing to do is try to exchange your Tether back to Bitcoin or Litecoin or one of the more liquid cryptocurrencies. So this is perhaps, I think, this is not an indictment of Bitcoin or Litecoin. This is more an indictment of exchanges, centralized exchanges, playing games perhaps. I'm not saying they are. I don't know enough about it. But it does highlight that there are things you don't know about the exchange. You don't know if they have the liquidity. You don't know enough about Tether. So basically, you may think you have these gains, but you can't cash them out. They're basically locked in a system where they're going to give you Tether, and then maybe Tether isn't worth what the dollar that you think it was. And here's an astute comment by a Smaulgld subscribers. Bank runs or wake-up calls and for the clearing up of fractional reserve practices in traditional banking, a wake-up call for crypto traders not to leave vast amounts of wealth on exchanges. So what you can do, instead of, you could take the Bitcoin, Litecoin off the exchange, but you still have the issue if you want to sell, you have to put it back on the exchange, or you have to find somebody willing to buy it from you. But when you put it back on the exchange and they're going to give you Tether, that's not really cashing out. So I want to know what you think, but here's some background information for you. This is the data dash a video. You could check that out. Sent to me via courtesy of C Sigma Show. I watched that's a good video. And then also, as I mentioned, follow Bitfinex, Boomers Are Evil, and Silver Watchdog, as they follow this much more closely than I have. But I will be following the Tether controversy more closely. Let me know what you think in the comments below.